In the lee of a picturesque valley where rolling hills meet the ancient arms of the Appalachian Mountains, there lies a town called Ellijay. It's a town not unlike any other in northern Georgia, sparkling with apple orchards, charming storefronts, and of course the intoxicating allure of crisp mountain air that brings weekenders up there in droves. But what's interesting is that beneath the quaint surface of this little town runs a really deep current of history, of character, of adventure. My name is Jared Degnan. Like many couples during the pandemic, my husband and I started to venture outside of our main homestead of Atlanta, Georgia. My husband's family had come from Ellijay, and so we decided to start going up there. And though I might have been a little bit reticent at first, Ellijay drew me in. Ellijay captivated and excited me. And we now go up there monthly, if not multiple times a month, just because this is a place that we go to get away. Just like any other podcaster, I dream of doing a travel podcast. So this, my friends, is that podcast. This is Ellijay Life. So let's start with some context. Ellijay is a town of about 1,600 residents and is about an hour and a half from Atlanta, depending on how liberal you think the speed limit is. Ellijay is better known as the apple capital of Georgia. But what's really interesting about Ellijay is that it's got a very long history, and unlike some of the other northern Georgia cities like maybe Helen or Blue Ridge, Ellijay was late to the party when it comes to quote-unquote tourism. And I think that's actually a good thing. I really appreciate it. There's still a lot of residents in Ellijay, and it makes for a very interesting and thriving community. Today, Ellijay is what you would call the quintessential mountain town with just over 1,600 people in the Appalachian foothills. It is best known for apple orchards. In fact, there is an annual apple festival that goes on every single year. There are tons of outdoor activities. Mountain biking is huge, and it attracts tourists from all over who want a taste of the northern Georgia mountains. But what I love about Ellijay is that there is so much more than meets the eye. To really understand Ellijay, though, as it stands today, you got to start with its origins. And like many places in the Southeast, long before what we would call Europeans arrived, the land that Ellijay now sits on was home to the Cherokee people. In fact, the name Ellijay comes from the Cherokee word Ellijay, Elatsei, which translates to green place or new ground. The area was once a thriving Cherokee village, and the land's natural resources provided everything the Cherokee people needed. In fact, this is kind of a red thread that goes throughout Ellijay's history. The natural beauty, the natural resources are inherently tied in with the historical ebb and flow of Ellijay. So the Cherokee people existed in relative peace. Obviously, they farmed, they hunted, they lived peacefully in these foothills for generations. But for those of you who are students of American history, you know that all changed in about the 1830s with the implementation of what's known as the Indian Removal Act. Most people know the Indian Removal Act for its connection to the Trail of Tears. So those of you who don't know the Indian Removal Act, this was the U.S. government policy that forcibly displaced the Cherokee people from their ancestral lands, and this included those in Ellijay. In fact, we will go into Chief Whitepath in later episodes. This painful event did lead to the Trail of Tears, which saw thousands of Cherokee marching westwards to Oklahoma, and many of them lost their lives along the way. Once the Cherokee were removed, though, that meant the land was opened up for settlers. And in the years following the Trail of Tears, Ellijay began to grow, most notably because of timber. Settlers moved in, and by the mid-1800s, the town had really established itself as a small but promising community. Now, the real turning point for Ellijay came with the arrival of the railroad in the late 19th century. In fact, you cannot arrive into Ellijay or move around Ellijay without seeing the presence of the railroads. The railroad transformed Ellijay into a hub for the timber industry. So timber was big before, but timber got even bigger now that they had a way to move timber in and out of the town. Surrounded by the vast forests of the Appalachian foothills, Ellijay became a bustling center for logging, and timber really fueled its growth. In fact, when you look at the Cherokee and Ellijay rivers, there are remnants of sawmills that dotted the area, and timber workers flocked into town. And for a while, Ellijay's economy really thrived on the back of this industry. But like many small towns, Ellijay really did remain fairly quiet and very rural for most of the 20th century. Where things started to get interesting was into the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, when the transportation to and through Ellijay became a lot more accessible. In fact, in the early 1990s, you saw the Zell-Miller Mountain Parkway run from Atlanta through Ellijay. And this is significant because Zell-Miller, as most Georgians are aware, is a former governor and former U.S. senator. He played a critical role in the modern development of Ellijay. Miller was born just outside of town in Young Harris, Georgia, and he really championed the construction of this highway as a way to connect northern Georgia to the rest of the state. It made it easier for people to commute in, it made it easier for tourists, and obviously new residents to access this part of the Appalachian Mountains. With the Zell-Miller Mountain Parkway, it was just an hour and a half from Atlanta, and that sparked a huge surge in tourism and brought new life to the town's economy. So beforehand, you just had timber and you had chicken, you had apples and all sorts of grown goods. But once things really started to heat up with transportation, that's when Ellijay really caught its stride with a lot of tourism. Now, you can talk to a lot of different people within Ellijay, and they will debate whether or not it's a good or a bad thing, but it's definitely had a positive impact on the economy. The other piece of this puzzle I should mention is the diversification of the Ellijay population. So when you have a major employer like Pilgrim's Pride, which is there today, it has brought in a new generation of workers from Mexico and Latin America primarily, but this influx of immigrant workers has really had a lasting impact not only on Ellijay, but it's diversified its population and really brought some interesting things to its culture. In fact, if you ask me, one of the most amazing things about Ellijay is its growing Hispanic community, how they've brought new traditions and influences, particularly in the culinary scene. If you ask me, I think it's probably one of the best Mexican hotspots in the northern Georgia area. When you look at maybe El Rey and La Catarina or Raspado Celeste, these are some of my absolute favorites. And hopefully we will go into a lot of these in individual episodes because I think that each of them is incredibly interesting and unique in its own way. So Mexican cuisine, being in the heart of northern Georgia, has kind of created this really interesting mixing bowl of cultures. So now locals and tourists alike come to Ellijay not only for some of the best food, but also to recreate themselves, hiking, mountain biking, etc. So when we talk about Ellijay, we can't not talk about the Appalachian Trail. So for those of you that know the Appalachian Trail, the southern terminus is a place called Springer Mountain. And Springer Mountain is just about maybe like 10 to 20 minutes from downtown Ellijay. And for those of you who have ever wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, the Springer Mountain Approach Trail and some of the accessible hikes from there are incredibly interesting. And I recommend doing it because it is largely accessible by just about anybody else. But the good thing is that Ellijay is more than just the Appalachian Trail. In fact, there are tons of trails all over the place. The Pinhoti Trail, Pinhoti, and I probably mispronounced that horribly. It's one of the most famous, not only mountain bike routes in the region, but it's got some amazing hiking that's in and around not only Springer Mountain, but across the Ellijay region. So if you are hiking the Appalachian Trail, it is not unusual for you to go through Ellijay. But again, you know, as someone who is I don't know if I would call myself an experienced hiker, but I have enough capacity to go on solo hikes during a day and not get myself killed, which I guess is saying something. But what's really interesting is that, you know, you can really find hikes of all lengths and difficulty levels in this area. Now, I can't talk about Ellijay without mentioning the Georgia Apple Festival. I can't talk about Ellijay and not mention the Georgia Apple Festival. It's actually one of the town's biggest draws. It's held every October. In fact, it's over 2 weekends. And the festival celebrates Ellijay's reputation as the apple capital of Georgia. In fact, for over 50 years, this festival has attracted thousands of visitors who come to Ellijay to enjoy everything from apple-themed treats to activities and local crafts and live entertainment. It's really a celebration of Ellijay's agricultural heritage and one of the most anticipated events of the year. I should also note that there is the Ellijay Bacon Festival, among other things, so don't think that it's just about apples, though apples are really huge. In fact, most people come up to Ellijay to visit apple farms. They go apple picking. So when you hear about RNA orchards, when you hear about Hillcrest orchards, or any of these other amazing places, they're all centered in Ellijay, though I will provide a little bit of caution. If you're potentially listening to this podcast on your way up, expect some traffic in these areas. Like the mountain roads, they're great, they're beautiful, they're gorgeous, just enjoy it. But when you get into the general vicinity of these apple orchards, just know that there's a lot of traffic in and out of the orchards. So just plan to sit in traffic for maybe about 5 to 10 minutes. It's still worth it, but just I say that as a word of caution. So today, Ellijay continues to evolve. It balances a deep set of historical roots with modern growth, and it's really embraced its role as a tourist destination while also somehow maintaining the quiet charm that's drawn people to Ellijay for generations. So whether you come for the apples or the outdoor adventures or the food, Ellijay really does offer a little something for everybody. It's a town with a rich past and a pretty exciting future when you look at some of the new businesses that are moving in, but it's really a place where history and modern life meet together at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. So that's going to be about it for this episode, and that pretty much wraps it up for this truncated history of Ellijay. Obviously, we've only scratched the surface, and as we explore the different facets of Ellijay, I want to show you Ellijay not just through tourist lens, but through the lens of somebody who has found it to be an incredible place to make, I guess I would even call it a second home. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you've liked some of this history and you're looking forward to more. We'll dive deeper into the stories, the people, the places that make Ellijay such a unique and wonderful place to live and visit. I very much appreciate you tuning in, and I really hope you'll join us again next time. So until then, my name is Jared Degnan, and this has been Ellijay Life.